Hello, and welcome to A Journeyman's Travels. I'm your host, Daniel Scheifler, and welcome. As we've been talking about this season, we've been talking about the atomic units of reasoning, also known as first principles, and on a couple of subjects that I particularly like retrospectives from Agile, and now, for my particular passion topic, leadership. And the reason why we're talking about these first principles is that they are intended as a reasoning tool, a way for you to think through what you are doing, and ideally, to make better choices in that space based upon the core principles, to use them as balancing points for trade-offs. And so I'm going to be sharing, both from my personal experience in leading teams as well as in coaching other leaders, the pieces I've been reading from books that have been coaching me, to the best of my ability to help you also now understand better what is leadership and how to execute it well. So for our first point here, the title of this episode, in fact, kind of gives it away. Leadership is not about you. In this case, you being the leader, because leadership is about people. It is very much about being able to influence and change the actions of others, not merely by governance of thou shalt, but by something more nuanced. Leadership is not a title or a position. It really is about this influence you have over others, right? Now, to be fair, our culture in particular has a lot of confusions at play, where, you get to be a manager and therefore you are also a leader. That's not exactly accurate. Management is not the same as leadership, and thankfully there's a growing awareness that the statement that leadership is not just a title is not something brand new. This idea that leadership is something else isn't novel. But practically, here's why we keep saying it. Leadership is not merely bequeathed upon someone by an external force. At least not just. It can't just be awarded to someone and suddenly say, thou shalt be a leader. Okay. Certainly you can receive a role where now you are expected to lead, and then given a group that you are expected to lead, but that won't magically make you their leader. They have to choose to follow. Your ability to lead, to guide and improve the action of others is directly tied to your ability to influence the ideas and behaviors of the people you're supposedly leading. Leadership is influence. And you can actually see this kind of captured in the very definitions of the root words. So take a moment here with me, right? If you think in comparing leadership and management, right? The root word of management is manage, the verb to manage, right? And here's literally what that means. To have charge of, to direct or administer, to exert control over, to direct or supervise. Now, those do feel like leadership type actions, right? You just won't give randomly control over something to someone you don't trust to control it well. You don't give them the ability to direct the actions of, except when you trust them, right? So obviously the ability to direct is leadership, right? No. Not really. Because if you look at that root word, to have charge over, you're supposed to take responsibility, but the idea is administration, not leadership. And so let me offer then this point for comparison, right? The root verb of leadership is to lead, which has this meaning: to show the way by going in advance, to guide or, and here's that shared word, direct in a course. And last, to inspire the conduct of. Management is the act of directing and administering something, often with the goal of maintaining some status quo, as in risk management. And as a direct consequence, the outlook of a manager is the avoidance of risky change, because it increases risk, right? Implicitly, the action of management then kind of comes with this idea of a hierarchy. Some have the responsibility to direct and some do not. And the expectation that the managed respond to the direction of the manager. Not necessarily by encouragement or insight, but by requirement. Leadership, by contrast, is the act of showing the way, the literal leading the charge. And baked into that concept is that the nature of the leadership should be going forward from the leader's own character, see, to inspire the conduct of. The hierarchical element is not necessarily baked in, just like it is in management, though it can be present, because there is still a sense of position. But instead of being vertical, it's horizontal. where are you going? Because that is the direction the leader needs to be going first. Now, in this case, being the leader implicitly means walking the path first, to literally show the way by going in advance. Now, good leaders and good managers likely have a lot of these skills overlapping, like effective communication, but the skills that really make the difference aren't going to be one to the same, because the skill of the leader specifically is around that going in advance and inspiring the conduct of, right? The inspiration talks about an intrinsic motivation, not an extrinsic one. And so this brings us to a very relevant point, right? And this is a quote from John Maxwell, but a man who thinks he is leading without followers is really just one out on a walk. The act of leadership can be taken individually, but we cannot call you a leader until you have sufficiently influenced someone else to choose to follow you. And that's okay. You can become a manager by position. You can be designated as someone who is expected to lead by position, but you are not leading until others are following in your path. And with that, this helps us to now center in on that core first principle I've been talking about, right? Leadership is not about you. It is about your behaviors, but the act of leading is other-focused. It has to be about influencing the behavior of others, otherwise it's not going to do anything, which would kind of be a waste, wouldn't it? And John Maxwell has another really good quote that talks about how this needs to advance. And he states this: "They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." You are working with and for people. One of the values I've seen in the servant leadership model is this kind of inversion of the pyramid, where instead of the leader resting on the base of 1,000 workers, it's the reverse, that the group that the leader serves is actually the base of 1,000 workers, and so the pyramid is resting on its point. And it also explains why organizations can kind of tend to wibble wobble. A little bit of movement down here leads to full gigantic waves up there in the 1,000 people. So the critical question I want to offer to a leader, or a prospective leader, for self-reflection is this: am I someone that others would want to follow? Or to put it another way, would I want to follow me? Think of the golden rule we took from, kindergarten and even before. The basic moral premise: do to others as you would have them do to you. Well, would you want to follow a leader who is doing what you're doing to your followers? Right? Would you want to follow someone who behaves like you do? And if the answer is no, that should lead us to some change. Leadership is about the people you lead. And it's about making them more effective, because your impact, your success as a leader isn't based upon your actions. It's on the actions you can inspire in others. It's a force multiplying operation. Can you make them more effective? Can you help them achieve their goals? Can you help them achieve the company's goals and their goals at the same time? And this means that leadership is a fundamentally new skill. And it's no longer about doing more of what you once did as an individual contributor. It is now about how do you help those who follow you do the things you used to do as the individual contributor to produce more effectively or more impactfully. Because usually, when someone is promoted into a position of leadership, it's because they were good at their previous job. But if you stop learning and assume that because you were good at your previous job, you'll be good at the next one, you are going to make a mistake and get stuck. Don't do that. Remember that leadership is not really a promotion. It's more akin to a career change, because you are now using a fundamentally different skill than what you started with. It's about how you can bring those who follow you to produce more effectively using what you knew how to do. And as a result, you have to see where the future might lead and prepare the people who are following you to act in a way that will help bring it about. Do you see a brand new capacity needed for your organization? Okay, what would you do to make certain you are ready to deliver on that? Oh, you'd go study this thing? Cool. Make certain your team's doing that. Right? This is the classic example. It's training. And very often, the new leader is the one who's skilled at the thing that they're expected to lead. Cool. So you know what you need to do. But this is a double-edged sword. You know what you need to do, doesn't mean you know how to train others to do it. And it makes it infinitely more tempting just to do it yourself. Because yes, in the short term, doing it yourself is more effective. Because in the short term, you can just get it done. After all, you were probably a top performer in that area. But that would make leadership about you and what you could do. But leadership is not about you. It's about the people you're leading. So how instead can you change your thinking and your operation to allow them to do the kind of work you could almost as good as you? Right? Because you're probably never going to get them to be as good as you. Because if you're doing that, you're probably training the next person, your replacement, which is good. But bear in mind, your goal is not to get them to be perfect. Your goal is to get them better and to be capable. And so that may mean learning to accept that not everything will be up to your full standard, because they haven't learned yet, and you still need to get work done. But bear this in mind as you go, because 5 people doing 80% of the work you could still produce more than all the work you could do by trying to do it yourself. Think about that, right? 5 times 0.8 gets me 4. 1 times 1 gets me 1. Which one would you rather have, 4 or 1? I prefer 4, please. And if you can tweak that to gradually improve their productivity over time, and maybe select the work that really matters for them, because that's something as being a leader no longer in the work, you're able to identify because you can now work on the work rather than in the work. Find ways to make them more impactful, not just by doing the work better, but by doing the right work, which you, having done it, can now identify. Leadership is not about you. It's about the people you lead, and in particular, enabling them to do more or more impactfully the work you used to. Leadership is about influence, not just title. Certainly a title will help because it grants some influence. But if that's all you rely on, you're going to run into a problem real quick. Because people choose who they will follow. And compliance is not the same as choosing to go in the same direction. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Your job as a leader is to be a steward and shepherd of people. And I hope that this first principle has given you some new insight as to the nature of leadership. And I believe it is very appropriate that this is where we started. Leadership is not about you. Rather, it is about the people you will be leading. Thank you for joining me on this A Journeyman's Travels, and I hope you will join me again in the next.